and gentlemen, podcasting since 2005, you were listening to Gamer Tag Radio with your hosts Godfrey, Pete Rock, Parris, Pastor.
I run this club. Come on. Yeah.
Welcome to episode 532 of Gamertag Radio. This is Parris, and I'm here with Pete.
What's up?
All right. As Danny hinted at on the last episode, Pete and I had the great opportunity to go to Los Angeles last week. Pete flew and I drove, and we got a chance to go to the preview event for The Division. So what we're going to do is this episode is we're going to play an interview with Magnus Jansen, the creative director for The Division. He's going to talk about the game for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and give our thoughts on the game and what you guys can look forward to on March 8th when it finally releases. Pete, anything you want to add before we go ahead and jump into that?
No, I think let's just fire straight off into the interview, and then we could do a little roundtable discussion of our thoughts of what transpired in LA.
Oh yeah, because I got a feeling we're gonna be spitting some hot fire.
Oh boy, here we go.
Because I don't think we're gonna agree. So before we do that, before we play that interview, let's make Danny happy, and remind you guys our website, gamertagradio.com. You can also listen to the show over at play.it. If you want to leave us a voicemail, that number is going to be 786-273-7GTR. And of course, our email address is fanmail@gamertagradio.com. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and play this interview with Magnus Jansen. He's the creative director at Ubisoft for The Division. We'll see you guys on the other side.
Voicemail 786-2737-GTR.
All right, what's up, everybody? It's this Peter and Parris from LA.
Yes.
We're here again. All right, so we're here at the Division Media event, courtesy of Ubisoft. Thank you once again, everybody, for inviting us out here. And we're here with Magnus Jansen, the creative director for The Division. So to start that off, can you go over the premise for The Division for people that aren't familiar with the game?
So Tom Clancy's The Division is an online open-world RPG. You play as an agent of the Division, embedded agents that are activated when society is on the brink of collapse and all other government agencies have failed. And in this world, in our game, that's because a deadly pandemic, a virus has been released in New York City and brought the city to its knees, and there's now chaos in the street, so you're activated to deal with that. In the open world game, in this third-person shooter, you can play solo or up to in co-op with up to 4 players. Going through the open world, picking what you want to do. It's an RPG, so you're going to level up and find new and better gear, and you're going to unravel the story of who released the virus, who are these factions that are now sort of dominating the streets, and then go in and take back New York. One of the coolest things we have is that in the middle of the map, you have something we call the Dark Zone, and you're going to be able to go in there seamlessly, no loading, no matchmaking. And when you go, just jump over the fence into the Dark Zone. Now suddenly you see strangers, not people, just people in the group, and multiplayer is enabled, but it's an ambiguous multiplayer. You don't have to shoot at them. You can work with them, or you can attack them to take out the enemy targets that are in there. Tom Clancy's The Division online open world RPG comes out on March the 8th.
Okay. All right, so can you describe any classes, or, and I think during the intro for the game you mentioned a classless gameplay. Can you explain or go deeper into that?
Absolutely. So in Tom Clancy's The Division, as an RPG, gear, all your abilities, the skills, the talents, all of that is incredibly important, and especially considering that it's a Clancy game, we want the combat to be tactical. We want thinking to be rewarded. So, and that way, Clancy, and the way that it was always sort of a thinking man shooter, and RPGs and RPG combat, which has always been about more than just running in and shooting. Thinking is rewarded, and tactics is a classical RPG element. So the way that making a first true RPG in the Clancy universe, it's beautiful. It's a match made in heaven. So with the gear and the way that you combine your guns, your gun mods, your skill mods, all the gear, your body armor and all of that, the way you combine that is what creates your own personal loadout. We don't have a class. It's not you in the beginning of the game. You create your own physical avatar. You pick your gender and your physical appearance. But you don't pick a class, because all of these things, it's incredibly important that you can change those on the fly. Because if I'm playing solo and then somebody joins me, now we're a team and we can specialize. But when I'm playing solo, I need to be well-rounded. So that's why it's important that it's classless and that you can reconfigure these things on the fly.
Now, tonight was my first chance getting an opportunity to play this game, and the highlight for me has been going into the Dark Zone. Now, my question for you is, with the loot drops, what's my incentive to keep going back to the Dark? I keep wanting to say the Dark Zone, correct?
Yeah.
Keep going back to the Dark Zone. Is it just the PvP element of it, or is there going to be loot-based incentive that it's going to want me to go back and play with my friends?
So obviously, the Dark Zone keeps evolving with you. So the Dark Zone, just like the open world, it doesn't have the same difficulty. It's not the same. It changes depending on where you are on the map. So the south part, that's the easiest part. That's where probably you want to start out if you first get into the game. Then it gets progressively harder the further north you go, and then when you reach the end of when you've leveled up, you reach the max level, you probably finish the campaign, the story. Then when you hit level 30, the Dark Zone actually changes for you, and all of the content of the Dark Zone changes into level 30 content, and everyone you meet in there is going to be level 30. So it's your own. It's your own special version of the Dark Zone, and the Dark Zone is always going to be a high risk, high reward proposition, meaning that because of the way of that you can meet other players and they can't shoot you, they can open fire and take your gear. Because if they kill you, you will drop whatever you found in the Dark Zone, and they can steal it. And because the things you found in the Dark Zone, they're not permanently yours until you manage to extract them.
Right.
Get them to an extraction zone, call in the chopper, survive until the chopper arrives, and then things get extracted. And until then, you're always at the risk of losing it. But it's going to be some really good gear in there. So it's a high risk, high reward proposition to go into the Dark Zone.
Okay, you just brought up something that I didn't realize. So once you get to level 30, at that point, you no longer interact with anyone under level 30 when you go into the Dark Zone?
Then we're always doing behind the scenes matchmaking to try to get people that are roughly the same level to play with each other, and that goes for if you're matchmaking for a mission in the normal part of the world, or whenever we try to match strangers, we're trying to match them in terms of level. Obviously, if you join up with a friend, we allow you to do that even if you're vastly different in level, because you always want you to play with your friends. But when we're matchmaking, we're trying to match people at the same level. So, but what I was meaning with the Dark Zone is that in the beginning, when you enter it, the Dark Zone is segmented in terms of that it gets progressively more difficult the further north you get. But when you get to level 30, we sort of do a refresh of it, and it's all now much more. It's a much more difficult version, still with some difficulty, and maybe even going in terms of the enemy's level being harder than even your level.
Okay, so with the Dark Zone, so you can only get out via specific areas, or once you've either extracted your contaminated weapons or you've lost your weapons and it's time to go. What's going to stop, or how is Ubisoft planning to mitigate griefing? Because I know during the alpha there were several instances I experienced personally where people would camp out at the exit or camp out at extraction zones and just go rogue and just do nothing but, make life difficult for those either trying to get their loot out or just trying to leave the area?
So obviously, when we have something like the Dark Zone where there's very few rules and people can prey on other players, we were always thinking about, so what's going to happen with these? Because there's certain personalities online, as we all know, that play online games. So what we decided was that, okay, we're going to get the players to police this. So if you're a rogue player, meaning a rogue is what our term for when you decide to kill other players, which is not something you have to do. But if you do that, you go rogue. If you kill a lot of players, then your rogue status turns into a bounty status. So you get a bounty on your head. That means that other players are going to get alerted to your presence, and they're going to know that they have a huge reward to collect if they take you out. So the players police the Dark Zone when we have those really how do I say, the really bad predators in there. But for them, of course, they're going to take that as a challenge, but then we're going to increase the bounty. So in terms of the experience in the alpha, that because it was a limited number of exits, it was possible to camp out the exits. In the full game, there's lots of exits, no problem finding one that you can exit, because the density of players is not going to be such that if people gang up on one of the exits, there's going to be empty exit somewhere. So you're just going to be, it's going to be definitely possible for you to find an exit that is, where there's nobody waiting for you.
Now, one question for me that caught my eye when you were doing your presentation earlier, you were explaining that there's a lot of content here for the solo player. You're not going to be forced into a PvP type situation, but listening to you talk about the Dark Zone and getting to level 30, that seems like a lot of the in-game content is going to be there. If I just want to be a solo player, or I just want to do the 4-player co-op portion with my friends, but I don't want to engage in PvP activity, is there still going to be enough to do outside of the Dark Zone?
Absolutely, yes. So you don't have to play the Dark Zone, even though, of course, I think you should. There's definitely a lot of content, a lot of challenging content, and a lot of end-game content that is not in the Dark Zone.
Okay. Going back to the multiplayer, you mentioned that there's a finite number. Can you tell what the max number of potential players in a server instance or in a game instance could be?
There is a number. I think that the important thing is that you're probably not going to, because we're filling up the Dark Zone to try to strike a balance in terms of it being a stressful and or interesting moment when you meet another player. So we don't want it to be full. And so obviously when we're doing these tests like the alpha or the upcoming beta, we're going to pack the Dark Zone a little bit more tightly because it's just a limited amount it's not the full Dark Zone. So it's going to be a little bit more dense than what we're going for. I don't know if we have the full number, if it's like 20 or something, but the point is not for you to see 20 people in one street corner. The point is for you to run across occasionally other players to keep the tension up. And of course we're going to have, when you do an extraction and you're calling in a helicopter to get rid of your, to safely get your contaminated gear out of the Dark Zone so it gets decontaminated so you can own it permanently. When you do that, that's visible from quite far away. So it's going to draw a lot of people in, but not all of them. So not all those 20, whatever. So you're never going to see that number. Well, sure, maybe, once in a blue moon, everybody's going to decide to go to the same place, and then we're going to have 20 people in the same spot. But that's not the goal, to have everybody meet in the same place.
Okay. Will there be any esport or clan support for the game?
Not that I know of. And definitely not for the release of the game. And I think that one of the things with esports with the Dark Zone is that it's such a formatless and rule-less multiplayer experience, meaning that, you come in and I see you, and we can, we can wave at each other, you do an emote, and we use the proximity VoIP to sort of try to figure out, are you going to shoot me or not? And so it's all, there's in the Dark Zone, it's filled with normal or like enemies, just like outside of the Dark Zone. And you can engage them, and you can have a great combat experience and get the rewards from them. And maybe we decide to do that. So it's not, that's the ambiguity of the Dark Zone. So it is not necessarily a multiplayer experience. So I think that the format as such of what we're doing in the Dark Zone is not something that it doesn't have the timer, it doesn't have the rounds, it's not a normal classic multiplayer experience. So we haven't been thinking about esports in that sense, because it doesn't have like the fixed rules that makes for sort of a sporting scenario. It's a little bit more ambiguous and unusual than that.
So with your weapons and armor, I noticed while I was playing there was a lot of opportunities for modifications and things of that nature. Is there any type of specific number that you can give on weapon types and various armor that's going to be in the game?
Great question. I'm poorly prepared, so I do not have the exact number. There's a lot of it. I'm sure if you can, you can contact and see if we do have the number, but I do not have it now.
Well, let me ask this. So I know today you don't want to get into specifics on what you're going to do for future DLC support and things of that nature, but are additional weapons and armor types something that we can expect in future iterations of the game?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it's important to point out that we're super serious about supporting this game after the release. We know that our work isn't done on March the 8th. We're very happy to announce that we're going to have some free updates, some free content supporting you, and then eventually down the line some normal DLC. We have been, up until very, very recently, we've been working 100% on getting what's in the box done. So and now we're super quickly, as we're nearing release and we're not allowed to do any major changes anymore, we're super quickly switching all of the developers over to thinking about what can we do to improve the game. But it's been very recently that we've done that mental switch and putting people actually working on it. So the plans are not, they're very recent, and I like that because we wanted to wait for the alpha test, for the beta test, to see what, to be able to react, because whatever ideas we have about what the game is, when it gets out in the wild and people start playing the Dark Zone and playing it, we're going to find things out that we didn't know about the game when we were developing it. And those learnings and those finds, being able to roll those into, the updates and the DLC is critical, so that we're not, that they're up to date with what the game is. So we've been deliberately waiting with finalizing the plans for the DLC and whatever goes into those updates.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Well, just as a wrap up, can you give us a final date for launch and what platforms?
Absolutely. So Tom Clancy's The Division comes out on March the 8th on Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC.
Because I always do this, I have a bonus question as you're talking about the DLC plans. So this is just more of you being a creative director and a part of the development team. So obviously you have some competitors out there that have open world shooter type games as well. And it's been pretty, in the news lately with microtransactions and just dealing with getting the, after launch DLC, out there, and just all the issues that have been going on. So, as a developer, how sensitive are you to that, listening to the community, and any plans in place to set up interaction with the community to be able to have that instant feedback?
We live and die by the community. The community is the gamers. We listen to them. We're always already before release and already before the public tests, we have a very active conversation with our fans, people on the forums, people that have fan sites, and people that are vocal about the game. We're communicating all over in social media and have a direct contact as well. And we're listening and we're talking to them. And it's a dialogue, and we intend to continue doing that and be very, very reacting to what people want and what they want to do. So obviously, as I previously mentioned, the what goes into the updates and what we release later in terms of free updates and then classic DLC is definitely going to be shaped by what people want. So people should make their voice heard, talk to us on Twitter, on Facebook, on the forums. Their opinion matters for sure.
Well, and the reason I ask that, because it's such a fine line going between, you have the hardcore players that are going to blow through all your day one content within 2 weeks, and then you're going to have the casual players that it's going to last 3-6 months down the road, and that fine line of supporting both the casual and the hardcore, but also having that additional content ready to go. And if it's not necessarily ready to go in a timely manner, being able to communicate that out to the community, like, hey, be patient, we're working on something great for you guys, but in the meantime, here's some cosmetic items to keep you appeased.
For sure. I mean, there's going to be a ton of cosmetic items in the game on the disc, and so there's more than enough, I think, to get cosmetic items for people to last them many weeks. Obviously, you're absolutely right. Some people blow through the content very quickly, and we're not ready to communicate quite yet what we're doing and what people will be sinking their teeth into once they're done with the main game. But we know very well what needs to be done, and that we need to be able to provide the gamers that are the fastest and the best and the most accomplished gamers. They're gonna, when they reach the max level, when they've done all the things that they can, they're going to want challenges. They're going to want something that's hard. They're going to want something that they can aspire to, that's going to put the character skills, but also their own player skills to the test. And they're going to want that, and they're going to want to be able to aspire to that and know about that. And we know that very well, and we're definitely going to be communicating very close to release what we're doing, what our plans are, and when they can expect to be seeing things. But hopefully what we have at release is going to last people for some time, and then we are ready with the updates very shortly after release.
Well, I can say for myself, getting some hands-on time tonight, I've been very impressed with what I've seen so far. I'm excited when this game is coming out in March, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome to Play It, a new podcast network featuring radio and TV personalities talking business, sports, tech, entertainment, and more. Play it at play.it.
This is Gamer Tag Radio. Voicemail 786-2737-GTR.
All right. I want to thank Magnus for taking a few minutes to talk to us about the game. I also want to thank Ubisoft. I never say it right, so I'll say both. I want to thank them for inviting Pete and I out to the event. We had a great time, and we really appreciate it. So, Pete, we heard from Magnus. Mm-hmm. We both got a chance to play the game. What are your initial thoughts after you also got to play the alpha? So What is your just overall thoughts right now with this preview event of the Division?
So I didn't see a lot of difference between what I played on the alpha and what I initially played. So to break it down for the listeners at home, the gameplay was divided up into two separate sections. First one was literally, in my personal opinion, it was the alpha that was pushed out onto Xbox Live for those who had pre-orders. The second half was giving everybody a chance to play at level 20 with a much higher complement of guns and weapon and ammo and abilities. Being that Parris hadn't had a chance to play it either at E3 or at or during the alpha, I figured, let me give Parris the heads up and just let him go in full bore so he can experience it. I've played it, ad nauseum. I was pretty much giving Parris, tips on how to play and stuff like that. So I wanted his full, immersed experience, for a discussion after. I didn't get a chance to play the level 20, but I can't see it being any more different other than just bigger, better guns, bigger, better, armor and abilities. That being said, I'm still excited for the game. I do kind of have pause after that last question from Parris about how would this game stand up to the likes of games like Destiny and other very popular games. That does bring a little bit of concern, but not enough to curtail my excitement for the title.
Which is fair. Here's my take on it. And I kind of touched on this a little bit during the interview. I think they have a loot problem. From what I've got a chance to play so far, you got to figure total time at the event. I got maybe good 2.5, 3 hours worth of game. I got to play what you basically played in the alpha, and I also got to do the level 20 stuff as well, which kind of like you said was just higher level stuff. I don't think it was any different than what we were playing at the lower level. Just higher level enemies, but so were we. Going back to what I was saying, I think they have a loot problem. I don't know what is that in-game carrot that I'm going to be chasing. What is that gun or piece of gear that I just gotta have that I'm going to be chasing in the end game? And that's what I was trying to get out of Magnus at the end. It's like, okay, this game comes out, we're probably going to blow through this thing in a couple weeks, and we're going to be at level 30 at the very end. Why am I going back to the Dark Zone? So what is there for me to keep going back?
The reason to go back into the Dark Zone is to get those bigger, better guns for those higher level people. Now, whether that's a PvE character or that's a person on the other side of the controller on the other side of the country, you're only going to get those better weapons by doing the grind in the Dark Zone. For those that aren't familiar with it, you heard what Magnus said about the Dark Zone. The Dark Zone is the PvP side of the Division. You still play. You still have the chance to take out NPCs or AIs or ads, as you would, normally call them. But they're higher level as you go into the different zones. There's 3 different types of dark zones. There's the lower level, there's the medium difficulty, and then there's the higher level 20 plus bosses. As you go through these dark zones, now remember, when you were in the dark zone, you didn't really capture a lot of loot. I noticed, and this is just from inexperience because you hadn't played it before, you have to keep an eye out for those green lights and those blue lights of when... Which
I also think is a problem. I do. I think that's another issue with the game.
What, that you have to go pick it up?
And look, we have to compare it on some level to Destiny. We just have to, because it is the big elephant in the room, right?
That's fine.
So to compare it to that game, I like it that when I get a drop, even if I don't get a chance to pick it up, it's going to be there for me after I complete the level, so to speak. You know what I mean? And I think fundamentally, maybe I'm just used to that and I've been spoiled, but kind of like you're saying, I was missing a lot of the drops because I may see them out of the corner of my eye, but I'm focused on the enemies and I'm like, I don't need to worry about it. And then you had to keep reminding me, no, dude, you got to go pick that up. So maybe that's just something I need to get used to, but I'll go back to what I'm originally saying. Since the Dark Zone is basically the PvP of the Division, and I was hinting at this a little bit in the interview, not everybody's going to want to do PvP, right?
That's true.
So they kept telling us over and over, the big guns and everything that you're going to want to get, you got to go into the Dark Zone to get. So what about those casual players that don't want to do PvP content and they just want to do the PvE content? So you, in that respect, then you keep on doing the PvE content stuff, which is side missions, escort missions, etc. All of the in-game single player campaign type stuff that you can do solo or with your friends. One of the instances that we saw, the person went and in the Division, you'll have random NPCs come up and ask you for help, and you can, if you accept and you say okay, you give him, like goods, whether it's medicine or food or a bottle of water or soda, and they'll in turn give you things. So sometimes it could be, XP, sometimes it could be a weapon. One of the ones that was dropped was a rare pink skin for a gun that the devs hadn't really seen. So
those are the instances, those are those RNG type moments from like Destiny where you'll get something good from something as innocuous as just handing over a soda to someone in need. So as you're playing those levels and as you're doing these difficulty missions, as you defeat the higher level single player campaign bosses, you'll still get weapons, or you can buy them from the vendors inside the safe house. So are you going to get a much higher level and much more damage or whatever type weapon than you would in the Dark Zone? You're probably not. You'll have a better opportunity for it.
That's the problem. If I'm not getting the quote unquote in-game gear unless I go into the Dark Zone, that's a problem. And look, I'm playing devil's advocate here because trust me, I did enjoy playing the game. I really did. I think that The Division is going to be a fantastic shooter, fantastic third-person shooter. I like a lot of the co-op elements that were on display. I like the Dark Zone. I like the element of PvE and PvP mechanics being mixed together. And you may find some sweet gear, but you got to basically battle your way out to be able to keep that set gear. I think that's fun. And
don't forget, it's not just because you got the gun, you can immediately start using it. You have to level up to the level of the weapon to be able to use it. So it's not just I got it from a drop from the Dark Zone, I can use it. No, you still have to level up if you aren't high enough to get it. And remember, you start at 1, and the more you play, just like in every other game, the more you play, you get rewarded by the ability to get access to more weapons and more armor and more privileges within that Dark Zone. And that's totally separate from the single player instance. So you have, you could be a level 30 in the PvE, in the PvE side of the game, but you could be a level 1 Dark Zone and be the ultimate noob and have no weapons and you won't have as much fun until you put in the time and put in the effort.
Understood. I get that. Another thing that he was talking about was when you get to level 30, they're basically going to try and just consistently match you up with level 30 people. So I almost wonder in that instance with your buddies, if you and I are playing day 1, we get up to level 30, but Danny and Boston aren't playing day 1. They don't come in, and let's say a couple months later, it sounds like we basically can't shepherd them into the Dark Zone because they're going to be at such a drastic disadvantage, and it's going to be screwed up because either they're going to be matchmaked into other level 30 people, or we're going to be completely overpowered because we're going to get matchmaked down to their level. It sounds like power levels.
How is that any different from going into the raid on Destiny? But yes, it sucks.
Here's the point. It's because it's PvP. That's the point. Because you're going up against other human characters that are going to be drastically higher level than you. So how is that
any different from the Iron Banner?
But that's a specific PvP mode. Look, I'm not trying to compare this to Destiny. You're the one that's bringing up Destiny.
I know, but you're using that as an example, and that's the best way to bring to compare it. And it's something that's totally familiar to you and I, and as well as to the listeners and those that hate Destiny Talk Radio. It's the same as Iron Banner.
But I don't want to bring Destiny. I don't want to bring Destiny into this because this is not my point. My point is about, like we were talking about in the interview, and he kind of explained it, but trust me, I wasn't that convinced. It's going to be the grief factor of people hopping the fence coming into the Dark Zone, and they're just basically just getting spammed. And they're not even getting a chance to explore the levels or anything because level 30 people are just sitting there waiting on noobs to come in. That's my worry, is what I'm trying to say, of situations like that happening. Now, if they're truly going to matchmake that only people that are of your level are coming in, fine. But then that goes back to what I was originally saying is our friends that are under-leveled, we're going to have to wait until they get to our level to be able to enjoy the game together. That's all my point.
That's fine. And to be honest, I didn't feel the warm and fuzzy from what Magnus said about how the players will police themselves.
No, they
won't. With respect to griefing, because that's been my big concern since E3, and that's something that I asked then, and obviously I had to ask then, again, this past weekend was, I'm sorry, I'm an a-hole. Parris, you've told me this on countless occasions, but I can't see more. I mean, granted, it was different during the alpha, where I had more instances of niceness versus characters going rogue against me, and maybe it gave me that false sense. But when we played Dark Zone against 20 plus other people in that event, I don't think anybody ever got any of their stuff out. It was always everyone going rogue at one point or another, and maybe that salted you to it.
I'm not salted to the game. I'm just pointing out, like I said, because I know you love it. So I don't want this to be the Division love fest on here.
No.
I mean, I have concerns, so it's like I'm just bringing those up. We won't truly know until the game is out in the wild on March 8th, and we're all playing together. Because kind of like you were just talking about, the one thing that gives me pause is the fact that even when we were playing, there were some instances where, hey, we were kind of working together with other teams and we're doing the extraction. And then right before the counter gets to 0, someone goes rogue and screws it all up. So is that going to be a common theme out in the community? I hope not. The fact that there's not going to be private servers or anything, and I understand the reasoning for not having private servers is fine. But kind of like Magnus is saying, we're putting a lot of faith into the community to play fair. And I don't think that's going to happen. So look, we'll see. We'll see. This is a preview. Look, graphically, we're playing the Xbox One version. Looked great. I was pleasantly surprised at how great the game looked on the Xbox One. Played smooth. The shooting felt right. The co-op, like I said, the seamless of going into our little private co-op into the seamless going into the Dark Zone where we're doing PvP with other people was fine. Obviously, we're at a controlled event. We'll see how it works over Xbox Live and PlayStation Network. But yeah, so far so good. I enjoyed it. It's just I just wanted to point out things that I raised an eyebrow at. And look, no game's going to be perfect. I understand that, and you make of it what you will. I mean, again, I think if you're a hardcore PvP person, you're not gonna have an issue with the Division at all. You're gonna have a blast doing the co-op and jumping into the Dark Zone and doing all that stuff. My concern is looking more at the casual side of it, of people that aren't necessarily comfortable doing PvP all the time. They're gonna feel intimidated, and they're probably gonna want to stay away from the Dark Zone. Is there gonna be enough content for them outside of the Dark Zone? That's all. That's my number one concern. As long as they have content and they're regularly updating it, and they're giving people that aren't in the Dark Zone things to do, I think that the Division will be fine. As far as in the Dark Zone, the PvP encounters, that's going to be fine too. And he did say, what about 20? They think it'll be about a good 20 people?
20 to 24 people. Well, yeah, I heard he said 20. Someone else at the event said 24. But I mean, still 20 to 24 is still a relatively strong number of, and remember, that's not just, live players. That number doesn't include the number of PvE
exactly.
AI that's in the game. So that's a lot of fun. So
and then no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
One thing that I wanted to touch on, but we ran out of time. We probably could have sat there and talked for another 20 minutes. During E3, they mentioned about how there was going to be a companion app that people would be able to play either like on a tablet or a smartphone and bring in drones and stuff like that. Was that canceled, or is that something that's like not going to happen?
Yeah, they didn't talk about it at the event. And honestly, this is the first time I'm hearing this, that you're talking about it. And I know you're a little more plugged in on the game than I am. I know Battlefield 4 was doing something similar, but I hadn't heard about the Division doing this. So, I mean, look, we can ask offline, obviously, and try and find out that information and talk about it next week.
Okay. Yeah, because that's something that always looked cool. And I was like, all right, that'd be dope to do that. I could, maybe not be on my Xbox, but, jump on my tablet and see friends playing and say, hey, I'm coming in with a drone. But then it like that whole news thing disappeared. So, again, we'll hopefully follow up with Ubisoft and see if they can answer that.
Now, here's my one other, and it's not a nitpick, it's not a concern. I'm just curious. Is there any type of in-game mechanic other than we're just playing a shooter? You know what I mean? And again, look, I got to bring up the D word in this. When you're doing a raid, part of the appeal of the raid is you're solving puzzles, and it's forcing you to work together with people and do things like that. I'm just curious if we're going to see that in the Division. Again, this is just a preview. They're not showing all their cards just yet, so there's still time for them to reveal something. And you could tell they're still holding something back. We've not seen everything in the game. You know what I mean? Because again, even when they let us get to level 20, that's not level 30. I mean, there were still 10 more levels leveling up that you could do in the game before you got to the cap. So there's still things to do that we've not seen.
I don't know from from reading through the forums and everything that I've looked into. I don't think there is. I don't think there's. Granted, they call it an MMORPG, action RPG shooter. So, and yes, that is like the big elephant in the room. Is it going to have a raid or something similar? I don't know. You would hope, right? With it, trying to call out the RPG name or that MMO type title, but I just don't know if something like that would make sense in a realistic shooter environment type game,
No, agreed. But I guess what I'm saying is in this world that they're creating, within New York, and again, I just shout out to, again, graphically, just the real-time weather effects and all that type of stuff going on. You have not necessarily, what's the word I'm looking for? The damage, destructible environments, excuse me. It's quasi-destructible environments throughout the world and all that. I mean, but again, size, scope, and everything, I was fine with the area that we're going to be able to explore. I would just like to see a level where maybe you have your co-op team, another co-op team comes in together, and you're forced to work as a team, together. To accomplish something with a boss or something that's just on a larger scale than you're normally doing in the game. That I would hope that something like that is there. If it's not, that's fine. Again, I think in this sense, because I think the Division is positioning themselves more towards the PvP crowd versus the PvE crowd, in my personal opinion. I think the PvE is there to get you used to the mechanics, the way the weapons and the armor works and the leveling up and everything. But the true end game, the true meat of the game is going into that dark zone and going up against, human characters. I think that truly is what the appeal of this game is going to be at the end of the day.
Well, it's an Ubisoft shooter. So obviously, I mean, with today's gaming, society, everything is shoot, and everyone wants to play against everybody else. I think it appeals to both because, and let me take that back. It appeals to both, but I'm probably going to have to agree with you where it gives more credence towards the PvP, simply because if you want to do bigger, better, you have to play the PvP to get the bigger, better weapons. But it doesn't totally shun those who don't want to go out and deal with the public. Let's put it that way. To go back to the companion app thing, I was digging while you were talking. They killed it. They killed that idea beginning or middle of or shortly after E3, simply because they didn't want to put too much focus, or they wanted to put more focus on the game versus a companion thing. So
right. And I guess the final thing I would say on it is, and again, I gently brought this up to Magnus, is I want to see a true roadmap for post-launch content, things that people can expect down the road, so that they don't, a month after the game comes out, they're sitting around scratching their head wondering what's next. Let us know. Look, even if you need time, because I think that's one thing that these developers and these publishers need to realize. If you need more time to give us quality content, take your time. No one's going to be mad or rage quit the game if you need an extra month or two to get out quality content. It's when you give us half-ass content is when people get upset. So if they come out and they're like, look, the game comes out in March, we're not going to have a major DLC drop until July or August, I'm okay with that. Just let me know. So we're not sitting around wondering if it's going to happen. You know what I mean?
So Magnus mentioned that there would be updates. Obviously, I would hope that, any company that was releasing a video game would be dropping updates. And he did mention that there would be DLC further on down the line.
They talked about free DLC, which, okay, fine, the cosmetic items, skins, whatever, but at some point you're going to want to make money off of this game. So like what I'm saying is, let me know up front what I need to pay to continue playing this game to get the true DLC content.
And I noticed, I know that he skirted around when we brought up season pass, because that's kind of like a dirty word now.
Yeah.
with titles.
Yeah, none of them want to say it. Yeah.
But I would like to see something along the lines of maybe different areas of the map that were previously unavailable. You know, like increasing the scope of the city to not just being, you know, the bottom half of Manhattan, you know, moving forward up to the top half, or maybe sliding on over to Brooklyn or the Bronx or Queens, or, you know, opening up Staten Island as, you know, like a DLC, something like that, and watching the game expand across, you know, New York as a whole. If you want to, you know, bring in, you know, New Jersey or something like that, or just something like that, I think would be really, really interesting as a way of downloadable content or future tracking of the game.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We know at some point they're going to have a major expansion, which is going to add a new area to the game. That's just inevitable. Now, the one thing, and again, this is a preview event. This is not the final game. We'll have a review once the game comes out. But one thing that I hope that they do, and look, we'll see once the game comes out, is I hope that not only do they have a plan for the DLC and all that, but I hope, like I was telling him in the interview, that they engage the community and they get the proper feedback that they need to make the game better, because the game that we get on March 8th will be vastly different on March 8th, 2017, because it just will be. If you look at these online games, they evolve. So you got to understand there's going to be issues. There's going to be problems day one. But if they're listening to their community and they're getting the proper feedback to it, they can change the game and make it for the better. And like I'll bring this full circle. I truly think their number one problem is going to be loot. He didn't seem very confident and excited to talk about some of the end game loot. And that just gives me pause, because a pink gun isn't going to make me grind for 2 hours to get it. You know what I mean? It's like, I need to know why am I going to the dark zone? What is that one piece of gear that I'm going to covet and I'm going to grind until I get it, because I know it's going to help me in the end game. I just hope that is explicitly spelled out by the time we get to launch.
So from being in the forums, they are really responsive. They're even during the alpha, there was constant communication between the developers and the forum members of, you know, what are you looking for? What are you seeing that you would like? What kind of balance issues are you seeing with weapons? They were deep diving into some of these forum threads, which you don't really, and to be honest, forums aren't really a real popular thing. And maybe it's something we've evolved over time, but this game in particular, and maybe it was just because it was the alpha, and hopefully they do it during the beta event as well, but they were really like paying attention. They paid a lot of attention to what people were saying, asking questions, getting PMs from devs about, you mentioned this, we were able to replicate it. Are you still seeing this? So hopefully this translates to beyond, launch, where, they're staying, in tune with the community, what's working, what isn't working, what can be better, what can be improved. So I have to stand up for them on this account, because they really did a good job of that during the alpha.
Yeah, and we'll see. And like you said, we know a beta is going to come, so a lot more people are going to be able to get their hands on this and get their own impressions before launch. And then again, we know it's coming on March 8th on Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC. So there's no last gen version of this at all. This is truly just a next gen game, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's no.
Right.
Thankfully.
So yeah, thankfully. So any last words on the Division? And I want to bring up one more thing before we get out of here.
No, I think we covered a good gamut of it.
Okay. Again, I want to thank Ubisoft for inviting us out to the preview event. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to more from the Division here coming on March 8th. So before we get out of here, since Danny and Patrick got a chance to talk about Oculus Rift and the pricing, just real quick, curious your thoughts. Price, Oculus Rift, the whole thing. What are your thoughts?
So I have a friend that's already earmarked it for use. Like he got it. He purchased it. He's reserved. Was it April? I think is when it's already been delayed 1 month from their initial estimates. I wouldn't buy it. Just me personally. I don't know if that's something that's I would want to play. I don't think, I think it's still a gimmick. I think it's still too early to say it's worth $600.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I am. And, I've been saying this for the last year and a half anyways. Price aside, I just don't know what the killer app is for this game. And I don't think VR's future is gaming. I really don't. I think it'll be the social interaction that will make VR successful. And again, I've not used it, so I'm talking from a point of ignorance. So you can send your email to fanmail@gamertechradio.com and tell me I'm an idiot. But I just don't see a game truly taking advantage of this VR stuff, trying like, oh my God, throwing my credit card at the screen. Please just give it to me no matter the price. This $5.99 price point is for the truly hardcore, techie gadget guy that just has to have the latest thing. Because don't forget, you also need to have a very high-end PC to use this as well. I will be curious to see what Sony prices their PlayStation VR at. I'm guessing $399, around there somewhere. They're probably going to have a little more initial success because there's simply just more PlayStation 4s that are cheaper and readily available, for people to be able to go and pick this up versus people having a high-end PC for Oculus. I think Valve is going to run into the same problem that Oculus is running into with a very high price and also needing a high-end PC to power this thing. It's just early days. It's still just too proof of concept for me. Until I see that app that everybody's talking about, that everyone's saying, dude, you need to pick up an Oculus because you got to play or you got to experience this. When that happens, that's when I'll start considering it. But until then, like you said, I just feel it's still gimmicky. Obviously, we'll get a little more hands-on at E3 this year because Oculus, I'm sure, will have a huge presence. We know Sony is going to have a huge presence with PlayStation VR, and I would expect Valve to as well. So, I mean, I guess to sum it up for me, this is 3D all over again. That's what I see, where they were pushing 3D hardcore. Everyone, oh my God, 3D is going to change gaming and the way you watch movies and TV at home and all that. All the TVs start coming with 3D and nobody bought them. And I kind of see that right now with Oculus. You're going to get that initial hype and then sales are just going to tank because why am I buying it?
So Eve Valkyrie looks like a fun game. It looks like what I originally envisioned Elite Dangerous to be like. Maybe I just need to spend more time on Elite Dangerous and maybe, get a little bit more proficient with, the whole flying concept. I think it's a good title to piggyback to. EVE is really, really popular in the PC gaming space. So I could definitely see that maybe helping push sales, but I just don't see, you could almost put a price tag on the two titles that they're earmarking to be tagged with it at $100 worth of content, a $60 Xbox One controller. So why package all of those extras in it if you could just lower the price to $350 or something like that? You know what I mean? Like, let's say an Xbox One controller costs what, $75,
right?
Plus $100 in software, that's $175. Just chop $175 off the $600 price tag, sell it for $425. Have a nice day.
Still too much for me, because I'm an old cheapskate. But, but I get your point. I mean, here, like I was saying when it initially came out, I was like, I wouldn't even consider this thing until the holiday because there's going to be a price cut. Just is. There's no way going into November of this year now that it's going to be $599. I just don't see it, especially if Sony comes in at $400 or less for their VR. It's just not going to work.
Right.
And it is Facebook. They can take a loss if they truly want to get this thing pushed out. And again, I think once this thing has a social interaction thing that truly works and brings people together in a virtual space to interact socially, that's going to be the killer app. And I think that's why Facebook bought it, because that's how they want people to interact with it. I think gaming is just the entry into this technology to get people on board to actually throw money at it and develop it. That's all I think. And then once the technology matures and we start seeing these apps that take advantage of it, it's going to be the social side, in my personal opinion.
I have another opinion on it, but I don't think it's safe for this show. So we'll I see it for a totally different market.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I see this. I hate to sound like a dirtbag like this, but I'm just going to.
Well, you know what? Let's just let the audience knows.
No,
they know.
I see
they
it.
Know. You don't have to say it.
I see it for the adult, and that's it.
Yeah, just leave it at
adult
that.
entertainment society. That's it. I don't. It's. I'm not saying congrats. That's exactly what we should do with it, but I see this as maybe going there. That's it.
Yeah, they know. All right. And with that said, let's go ahead and get out of here before the FCC shuts us down. So this has been episode 532 of Gamertag Radio. I want to remind everyone again, if you want to leave us a voicemail, that number is 786-273-7GTR. And again, our email address is fanmail@gamertagradio.com. You can find us at gamertagradio.com, and you can also find us over at play.it as a part of the play.it network and CBS Radio. So, Pete, thanks again for sitting down, talking the Division. I think people will be very anxious to get their hands on that beta when it finally comes out. VR, we'll see. And next week, I'm sure all of us will be back together again. Danny and Patrick, myself and Pete. So until then, this has been episode 532 of Gamertag Radio. I'm Parris. That's Pete. We'll see you guys soon.
Peace.
You're listening to Gamertag Radio. Be sure to like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Thanks for listening. Tune in next week.